Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us in this webinar on the new Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit. It's great to see so many of you during your lunch hour. We've got people from all 4 nations of the UK and some overseas delegates as well, so you're very welcome. And I know that we've got paediatricians, neonatologists, obstetricians, midwives, neonatal nurses, allied health professionals, trainees, and we even have parents here today and parent charities. So that's great, and we're looking forward to a lot of interaction over the next 90 minutes or so. So I'm going to introduce the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit, and thereafter we'll be hearing from some high performers in their local units who will share with you their antenatal optimisation improvement stories. But firstly, however, I want to focus all of our minds on the reason why we're here today and invite Ellie Salisbury, a parent speaker, to share with us about her own experience of having a preterm birth. She has now gone on to become an inspirational parent voice in the antenatal area of antenatal optimisation, and we'll hear from her now. Thank you, Ellie.
Hi everybody, I'm Ellie Salisbury and I'm a mum of twin boys born prematurely at 27 weeks at St Michael's Hospital in Bristol back in 2013. I'm also one of the parent reps on the Precept project and I have been for the last 6 years or so since it began, and also I was a parent representative on the neonatal peer reviews that took me around the country, and I saw lots of different neonatal units and was, yeah, I guess a little bit shocked about the differences in the patient and parent care across the country, and the different experiences depending on where you live in the UK. And finally, I'm also a member of the Southwest Neonatal Network Parent Advisory Group. Had to look at my notes there, such a long title. And also I work full-time in film and television and have 2 kids, so yeah, it's quite full on. But anyway, I just wanted to talk to you today about antenatal optimisation. Of course, that's what you're all talking about, but this is just from a little sort of chat from me about a parent's perspective. Very quickly, because I haven't got long, I know. So as I said, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I had twin boys in 2013. At 27 weeks, as I said, due to pre-prom and suspected chorioamnionitis. Let me give you a photo of them both. I'll try and share my screen. Is this going to work? Hopefully. Here they are. That's Jay and Cormac at St Michael's Hospital. So Jay, who is there on the right as you're looking at the photo, unfortunately suffered 2 grade 4 brain bleeds when he was about 4 days old, and he died in our arms when we switched to palliative care, which was obviously very hard for us. But twin 2, who we called Cormac, who's also there, he was very seriously ill, but he pulled through, had about 100 days in NICU, and very typical roller coaster ride of a journey, but in the end he did pull through. He was very determined little so-and-so, and came home without oxygen. Here he is on his last day with all the amazing team at St Michael's. He came home without oxygen, even though it was all set up at home, and is now, well, this is him. He's now 7, would you believe? Here's a few photos of lockdown, I think these mostly are. He's an amazing little boy who loves all sport. He's extremely active. He wins gymnastics competitions. He's a mad mountain biker. He loves Lego. He loves to surf, and he is incredible. Now, that was just to give you a bit of background, really, and a few photos. I'll probably put them up again at the end, but we're talking about antenatal, obviously, optimisation, and my waters broke at about, well, they broke at 25 weeks. I say they broke. I had no idea that's what it was. I was at work and I had a tiny spot of wetness, I guess, when I went to the loo one day, and I saw it and thought nothing of it really. But I'm very close to a friend of mine at work, and thank goodness I am, because I just mentioned it to her and she said, oh, I think you should go and have a look. St Michael's is only up the road, go and see what they think. So I didn't turn the computer off, I didn't even put my coat on, to be honest. I wandered around the corner to St Michael's and asked them what it might be. Obviously, I was pregnant with twins and just thought I better check it out. Unfortunately, they did that horrible test. I can't remember what it's called now, and that's when our world, myself, my partner, was slightly turned upside down. I was 25 weeks, and yeah, was told that I potentially could give birth. I was quickly given steroids, thank goodness, which was great. I didn't know anything about them at the time. It was very scary. I was all a bit of a blur, so that wasn't the greatest place to be hearing about steroids, I have to admit. And I managed to keep the boys in for 14 days longer, a bit of time at St Michael's and a bit of time at home. And then finally I did, my waters broke properly at 27 weeks, and I went into St Michael's quite early, as soon as that happened, sort of early on in labour, and was lucky enough to be given magnesium sulfate at the time, which 7 years ago was fairly rare, but St Michael's was leading the way in this, and I feel incredibly lucky that I was given a loading dose and an infusion, and I feel that was pretty vital really on the fact that Cormac has no signs of any sort of brain injury at all, and he's incredible, which is why I am very proud to be part of the Precept team and do believe that every child born under 30 weeks should be, every mother should be given magnesium sulfate. Now, I received incredible care, like I said, and you guys are my saviours, because my son is incredible. But I do feel, you know, we're all here to learn, and you learn from every situation. I do feel that I was pregnant with twins, and I guess that's a fairly fairly medium to high risk of giving birth prematurely. But yeah, I knew nothing about giving birth early. I knew nothing about steroids, nothing about magnesium sulfate or group B strep. Really, I'd never seen a neonatal unit, and I didn't know what one looked like. And I didn't know the signs to look for about giving birth early. And I do feel that actually my GP or my midwife could have chatted that through. I know there's a fine balance that we all have to, you know, we all talk about quite a lot. I talk about it a lot with my parent groups, various parent groups. I know you don't want to scare women, you don't want to scare women who are pregnant, because you want them to be happy and safe and well. But I do, having spoken to a lot of mums who've given birth early, they all feel they would have wanted to know more. And actually then I think if you speak to the same amount of mums who didn't give birth early, I'm not sure any of them would say, oh, I wish I hadn't heard that, I wish I didn't know that. I do believe strongly that all mums have the right to sort of know that information, and it doesn't have to be too scary. It just should be part of what they're told maybe early on when they see the GP or midwife, because of course once you get to the antenatal groups, that's a bit further down the line, that's a bit late then, because most of us have given birth already if we are going to give birth early. So I think I could have been signposted to it way earlier. TAMBA, I was a member of TAMBA, the twin group, and they didn't even talk about it. I've been to a few TAMBA groups. It probably is better now, but I do think if I'd have had that knowledge, I could have been part of that. I wouldn't have been so scared. I could have known about steroids, mag sulfate. I could have, you know, known about what was happening and felt a bit safer and slightly more in control. I think that I know it's probably getting better. It's probably better since it happened to me 7 years ago. I had another baby 5 years ago, 2 years later, and actually was at risk of preterm birth given my history. And I was amazingly given a leaflet about mag sulfate when I went in for one of my scans, and it was one of the leaflets I helped produce. So that was fantastic. That was a sort of rounded journey for me. This I'd helped give information to mothers about these things. So yes, I think that's my 8 minutes up. I think it's absolutely fantastic that everybody's talking about this, and I do feel that across the country that sort of standardisation of care would be fantastic. I'll share again a couple of photos of Cormac, and I will sign off here and say thank you very, very much for listening, and I hope you have a great webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Ellie, for sharing a very moving story of your experience as a NICU parent, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and comments for you to answer later on in the session. So in introducing the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit, I want to explain how this fits into the Perinatal Optimisation Care Pathway, which has been delivered by the BAPM Quality Group. So perinatal optimisation refers to the process of reliably delivering evidence-based interventions to improve preterm outcomes, and the care pathway refers to these interventions as they occur over time, right from the antenatal period all the way through to the immediate postnatal period. And the entire pathway is supported currently by 4 BAPM toolkits, starting with antenatal optimisation, which also encompasses prediction of preterm birth, and going on to optimal cord management, normothermia, and maternal breast milk, which all take place in the immediate postnatal period. And these toolkits align with other national drivers and implementation programmes, which will be discussed later by Tony Kelly. So the evidence supporting the key elements of antenatal optimisation is pretty robust. We know that steroids reduce death, necrotizing enterocolitis and intraventricular hemorrhage, as well as a range of other preterm outcomes. Magnesium reduces cerebral palsy, and antibiotics given in established labour can help to prevent the onset of early neonatal sepsis from group B streptococcus. Place of birth is really important, such that we know that infants who are less than 27 weeks who are not born within a tertiary unit or a NICU setting are at higher risk of severe intraventricular hemorrhage and a higher risk of death. So there is an increasing imperative to ensure that these interventions are delivered in a timely way to women who are at risk of preterm birth. And as such, there are a large number of UK and international organisations who are now driving antenatal optimisation, either through the setting of standards or through benchmarking or through implementation programmes. And last year, the BAPM and the National Neonatal Audit Programme partnered together to deliver 4 Perinatal Optimisation Toolkit over the coming years, with the BAPM providing the QI resource and the NNAP providing a measurement and benchmarking strategy. The toolkits will provide the evidence of interventions, but they're not a guideline. And instead they provide subject-specific QI support to implement the evidence. And so we assist units in analysing their own processes and contexts, and by doing so they're then able to choose the best QI strategy, choose the best change strategy to help them implement the evidence best. We also help units in monitoring and interpreting results of their QI activity and signpost to resources such as those already present on the BAPM quality web pages. So while not a guideline, the toolkit does set some broad aims, which are aimed really at maximising the number of eligible women who receive these interventions in a timely way. And there's a large focus on prediction of preterm birth, getting an accurate timing of birth where possible, so that the therapeutic window for these interventions can be optimised. So we know that steroids are most effective when given between 24 hours and 7 days before birth. We know that magnesium should be given within the 24 hours before birth, but ideally greater than 4 hours, and antibiotics should be given immediately established labour is diagnosed. But as well as these interventions, accurate prediction of preterm birth can help the in utero transfer process by ensuring that we get the right women to the right place to deliver their baby safely. As well as providing aims, we also provide best practice suggestions as well, against which units can compare their own practice and identify any gaps. So we focus on 3 main areas, one, the first being improving awareness, and that's not just women, but in primary care and secondary care also. Improving prediction, as I've talked about already, in threatened preterm labour through technologies such as the QUIPP app, which the BAPM endorses, but also in medically indicated birth through fetal surveillance, including placental growth factor, which is obviously being promoted by the NHS Accelerated Access Programme. Lastly, in improving delivery of antenatal optimisation interventions, we suggest using the mnemonic STAMPED, which promotes all of the interventions, but also shared decision making with parents and the development of a comprehensive delivery plan. So the improvement journey takes place over 5 phases, which take users from defining their problem right through to implementing, embedding and sustaining. And this is a model that is already used by the academic health sciences networks pretty widely, so it may be familiar already to some of you. In phase 1, we help you to understand the local data and consider that in the context of national standards and benchmarking, using specific QI tools to interrogate your processes, such as this fishbone diagram here, but there are other examples as well within the document. We encourage you to develop an improvement plan using a driver diagram to help structure your project, and importantly, to learn what other high-performing units have undertaken in order to make changes successful within their units. And you can do that yourself by going to NNAP online, but we provide you with some improvement stories within the toolkit, as well as a really powerful parent voice. And while we give you parent experience within the toolkit, it's really important to understand where you, the parent voices of your own service, which help to identify the gaps that may be present. In phase 2, we suggest how you might develop your quality improvement team, but also to engage stakeholders as well, the people who'll be carrying out the changes on the shop floor. And we're all quite guilty sometimes of working in professional silos, and the BAPM and MAT-NEO-CIP really recognise the imperative to really try and discourage this as much as possible and to establish really good team working behaviours. And as such, there will be a and the perinatal team that we will deliver sometime next year. In phase 3, we encourage the development of a project charter, which helps to detail your improvement and your change ideas, but also can act as a levy for management and for funding in your project. We help you to formulate test solutions using established QI methodology, and any methodology that you prefer is fine, but we point you towards the model for improvement and PDSA cycles. In phase 4, we describe the difference between outcome, process and balancing measures, but help you to understand what might be the best data for your particular needs in your local situation. And then how to analyse and display that data using QI tools such as run charts and such as statistical process control charts, so you can understand whether or not change has actually occurred or not. And we recognise that these tools are not always particularly user-friendly, and that you may need to adapt them for your audience. And so we help you to think about how you might modify your message and your data so that it reaches the wider team and parents. Lastly, in phase 5, it is about implementing, embedding and sustaining change. We discuss spread and also point you towards exception reporting. We have developed a case review tool for antenatal optimisation, which you can download and modify for your own local use. And we discuss some of the barriers and loss of motivation that occur over time and help you find solutions to those, whether they're through checklists, stamps, stickers, etc., or through promotional posters, or using, again, your parent voice to try and re-engage staff and increase momentum. So lastly, if you haven't already and your appetite has been whetted by this, please visit the BAPM website pages where you can download a copy of the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit for your own use. There you will find the Normothermia Toolkit also. And in the coming months, these will be joined by maternal breast milk and optimal cord management. Lastly, I just want to say a huge thank you to the fabulous Toolkit group who brought such energy and enthusiasm and expertise to this project, doing it all in their own time and over the last extraordinary few months, which have been very challenging for us all. So thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on now and hear from Naomi Carlisle, who, as well as being a midwife in King's College London, was also a key developer of the QUIPP app toolkit, which BAPM endorses and you can find on our web pages also, but is now undertaking a doctorate with the National Institute for Health Research on preterm birth surveillance pathways. Thank you, Naomi.
Hi, I'm Naomi and I'm going to talk to you about improving prediction of preterm birth and the QUIPP app. As we know, determining which patients are at risk of preterm birth is a challenge, and as clinicians we're not very good at determining which women are likely to deliver early. We know that if a woman arrives with symptoms of threatened preterm labour, so whether this is abdominal pain or back pain, we know that the majority of these women will actually give birth at term. However, what seems to happen at the moment is that the majority of these women end up getting admitted to the antenatal ward, and often they're still there a week later, haven't had their baby. And once these women are admitted, it means not only are they bed blocking the service, but it also means that often they're given interventions that they don't actually require, such as antenatal steroids. And I think what this really tells us is that we really need to be better at accurately predicting which women are likely to have their baby early. Because firstly, it means that all of these women who don't need to be in a hospital can be safely sent home and not over medicalised, but also it means, more importantly, that the women who really do need to be in hospital really do need to be in the right unit where there'll be correct facilities for her to give birth and the correct neonatal level expertise for her baby, that she can be in that right environment, and that can only happen if we can accurately predict who really needs that sort of care. And this slide here is really just showing that all of the interventions that we give women and their babies when we think women are at risk of having a preterm birth, all of these interventions are really important, and we definitely should still be giving them to women that need them. But this chart really just shows that there are risks to every single intervention that we do give women, and it really just highlights again that we really need to be thinking about who we give these interventions to and ensuring that we're only giving them to the women who really need them. So the women who are likely to give birth imminently, we definitely don't want to be giving all of these interventions as a blanket approach to everyone. So when a woman arrives in threatened preterm labour, there are a number of predictive tests that we can utilise to help us make a decision when triaging her, and these are outlined on the slide. Two of these predictive tests, so transvaginal ultrasound cervical length measurement and fetal fibronectin, have been incorporated into an app which was developed by the team at King's College London and St Thomas's Hospital. This is the QUIPP app, and it gives you a risk score for the woman's risk of having a spontaneous preterm delivery. So the QUIPP app is free to download on Apple and Android, and there's also a website version available. The QUIPP app is a decision support tool, so it's definitely not there to tell you what to do, it's there to help you make a decision about women who you are triaging. So this is what the QUIPP interface looks like. So you can see on the very first screen, there are 8 questions that the QUIPP app asks you when a woman arrives in threatened preterm labour. So the first one is symptoms suggestive of abnormal or premature uterine activity, and you would click yes because that's why this woman has arrived in triage. The next questions are previous cervical surgery, previous preterm birth, previous prom, number of fetuses, because this app is validated on both singletons and twins, the woman's current gestation in weeks and days, and then the cervical length measurement and or the fetal fibronectin result, depending on obviously what predictive test you're using at your unit. Then you click calculate and it will come up with the middle screen, which shows you the woman's risk of preterm delivery between these clinically important time frames, so within 1 week, 2 weeks and 4 weeks, and before 30 weeks, 34 weeks and 37 weeks. And if you click on any of these risk scores, so for example I've just circled the risk score within 1 week, it then comes up with a donut infographic diagram which gives a visual representation of that risk score, and we found that's quite helpful when you are talking about the risk score with the woman and her family. So you might have noticed on the very last slide that I had that yellow circle around risk of delivery within 1 week. And the reason I did that is because when the app gives you all of those risk scores for a woman's risk of delivery, the risk of delivery within 1 week is the nearest time frame that the app gives you. And the reason that that is important is because if a woman arrives in threatened preterm labour at your triage, that is the risk score that you will most probably be looking at to try and determine whether to send home this woman or admit this woman. Because that is the one which is telling you not if this woman is going to have a preterm baby or not, but is this woman going to deliver imminently or not? And that's what's important when we are trying to time when to give antenatal interventions. So we undertook a Delphi consensus survey with experts in the field of preterm birth to try and help us determine what would be an accurate guide to give clinicians when they are triaging women in preterm labour. And what they came up with was that if a woman's risk of delivery is more than 5% within 1 week, that's when you should think about admitting her, transferring her to another unit, giving her antenatal interventions. If her risk of delivery is less than 5% within 1 week, that's when you should think about sending her home. These are definitely guides, they're not dogmatic instructions, but we have found that this guide, the 5% guide, is quite helpful, especially for junior clinicians who don't have that much experience of triaging women in threatened preterm labour. So the QUIPP app is a validated tool. It's had lots of published papers. If you'd like any copies of these papers, please do just email me and I'm more than happy to send them across. It's also registered with the MHRA as a Class 1 medical device, and it has a CE marking. The QUIPP app has also been recommended by NHS England in their recently updated Saving Babies' Lives Care Bundle version 2, the COVID update. It's also been recommended in the PERIPrem West of England care bundle. It's been recommended by Pan London, and also recently it's also been recommended in the BAPM Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit. So often people ask me how accurate is the QUIPP app at predicting preterm birth. Well, you can see the full results on this in the 2 papers which are referenced at the bottom of this slide, which were published papers last year, looking at the sort of validation and development of the. However, this is just one slide which I wanted to show you, which just demonstrates the negative predictive value of the QUIPP app. And you can see that it's got a very high negative predictive value at 99.6. So it is a very accurate tool to be using when you're triaging women. I just wanted to show you this slide as well, which was a retrospective analysis done in 2017 by Ellie Watson. And you can see that if you had 100 women and if you treated them with the current NICE treat all policy compared to using the QUIPP app with them and going by the 5% risk policy, which I talked about earlier, by using the QUIPP app, 89% of hospital admissions would be avoided, and obviously all of the associated risks and costs of over-medicalising women who don't need admission to hospital. So I think this again just demonstrates that the QUIPP app is a safe tool to be using on women in your care. Thank you so much for listening. I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Please do contact me if there are any questions that you have, and if you'd like a more detailed presentation and if you'd like more information, please do visit the QUIPP app toolkit, which is available at www.bapm.org/QUIPP. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Naomi. It's really exciting technology, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions on that towards the end. Just want to introduce now Dr. Manju Chandramani, who's a consultant obstetrician at Guy's and St Thomas's, but she's also been forefront at in the development of the Pan London in utero transfer guideline, which has been really successful in getting the right mothers to the right place to deliver their baby in a NICU setting, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that now.
Hello, my name is Manju Chandiramani. I'm a consultant obstetrician at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust, and I want to thank the organising committee for the opportunity to present to you today on the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit, and particularly on place of birth. And my title, the title of my talk is entitled "Moving Mothers, Not Babies." I'm also the maternity lead for implementation of the Pan-London IET guideline for NHSE London, and I will be using my experience in this quality improvement initiative to describe how we are trying to improve place of birth for very small babies in London. You're all aware from having looked at the toolkit already that the place of extreme preterm birth does indeed matter, and I'm going to focus on optimizing place of birth with relevance to this talk, specifically in utero transfer to NICU settings if the baby is at less than 27 weeks in a singleton pregnancy, less than 28 weeks in a multiple pregnancy, or less than 800 grams in estimated fetal weight. Why does this matter? It matters because one more baby would survive for every 20 women transferred if we did have babies born in the right place, and babies who are not born in tertiary units are at an increased risk of poor outcome. There is a lot of data to support this, the fact that place of birth does matter. In this study done by Neil Marlowe, and it was a follow-up for Epicure 2 study, it showed that perinatal mortality for babies born at 22 to 26 weeks was 72% in a level 1 unit versus 53% in a level 3 facility. And actually better survival in NICU was not associated with increased morbidity in these babies. Another study looking at association of early postnatal transfer and birth outside a tertiary hospital with mortality and severe brain injury in extreme preterm infants also confirmed this. This was a retrospective observational cohort study determining if postnatal transfer or birth in a non-tertiary hospital was associated with adverse outcomes in preterm infants. Data was collected from the UK National Neonatal Research Database. They captured 17,577 preterm births less than 28 weeks between 2008 and 2015. They concluded that in extremely preterm infants, birth in a non-tertiary hospital and transfer within 48 hours were associated with poor outcomes when compared with birth in tertiary settings. They recommended that perinatal services promote pathways that facilitate delivery of extremely preterm infants in tertiary hospitals in preference to postnatal transfer. This was a further publication that was published this year on data in Illinois showing that that extreme preterm birth pausing. And finally, this is another study that was published in JAMA Pediatrics this year, confirming that place of birth really matters. And the risk of neonatal mortality was similar for infants who were very preterm, whether women initially presented at a level 3 hospital or who were transferred to the level 3 unit before delivery, suggesting that antenatal transfer really does matter and that babies who are transferred in utero do better than those transferred ex utero. So within the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit, best practice with regard to in utero transfer is focused on ensuring efficient and effective referral and transfer processes. And it suggests that networks should work to establish a network-wide combined maternity and in utero transfer policy, including reciprocal transfer, a central referral hub with defined turnaround time, which is auditable for requests, decisions about appropriateness of transfer being made by senior clinicians and supported by risk assessment tools using details of maternal and fetal well-being and progression of labour, remote support for clinicians in LNUs, SCUs by those in neonatal intensive care unit settings, NICU and associated maternity unit policy of auto acceptance of in utero transfers, and guidance about staff resource and experience required to accompany in utero transfer, and guidance for ambulance service partners about time critical nature of transfer. Now moving on to my experience in London, and this is reflects the implementation of the in utero guidelines for extreme preterm birth. And this is just showing data from 2013 of our experience in London, and highlighting in 2013 only 71% of our extreme preterm babies were born in NICUs. And that seemed to improve in up to 2016 to about 80%, but London was still not doing as well as the rest of the country. This data shows London progressing towards 2019 and showing that actually over 2017 to 2019 we were doing a bit worse, and certainly not as we were doing worse than the rest of England. What was the impact in London if we could move to 95% of babies at less than 27 weeks being born in a London NICU centre? And we estimated that it was likely that 30 more babies would survive. And we explored why in utero transfers failed in London. 45% were due to clinical reasons. This feeling that 90% in cases it was too late to transfer the mother, or it was the mother was too unstable. 14% were due to pathway issues, and 41% were not even requested, and there was no obvious good clinical reason for the lack of this request. So it was thought that at least 55% of these were preventable. And the barriers to antenatal transfers were thought to be either too difficult or in some situations not prioritized. So the guidance for pan-London in utero transfers were written and disseminated in 2018, but there was little improvement to the process. So NHSE made a commitment to implement this guidance, and there were two leads, myself being the maternity lead and my counterpart and neonatal lead, Dr. Rationale Nandaran, were tasked with the implementation of this guideline. We tried to establish who should and should not be transferred, used a prediction tool, which you've already heard about, the QUIPP app, and tried to standardize a network pathway and embed this within the emergency bed service. We undertook stakeholder engagement and continue to do so as part of this 6-month pilot. We sent regular updates to all stakeholders, and particularly clinicians were invited to attend our weekly engagement surgeries, which we continue to run every Thursday, where we undertake this as an iterative process and address any concerns that occur, and it also gives us the ability to get real-time data on what the issues are. This is some of the data that shows our changes between 2018 and 2020 in terms of our different LMSs. Our ambition within the region is to get 85% of our extreme preterm babies born in NICUs. And this again shows our movement in London from 75% in 2018 to 2019 to 78% in Q1 of 2020 to 21. In summary, I'd like to conclude with re-emphasizing that we predict using our prediction tools such as the QUIPP app to target our resources and evidence-based interventions where they are needed. And when we cannot prevent preterm birth, we really are responsible for optimizing outcomes by ensuring administration of steroids and magnesium sulfate in a timely way and optimizing place of birth for these babies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manju. Such important work, really complex issue as well, with really complex solutions. So now I'd like to introduce Sarah Coughlin, who is a preterm midwife champion in South East London, and she's going to give us a midwifery perspective about the successes and challenges of delivering antenatal optimisation in a busy delivery unit. Thank you.
Hello, I am Naomi and I'm going to be reading out this presentation on behalf of Sarah and reading what she's pre-written. Hello, my name is Sarah and I'm the preterm birth champion for Lewisham and Greenwich NHS Trust on the Queen Elizabeth site. My usual role is as a high-risk midwife on labour ward and I care for many of our preterm mothers and babies. I first started this role 2 years ago and I'm very proud of the advances and improvements that our trust has made in the care of preterm babies and their families. The PRECEPT programme was implemented because the prevalence of preterm birth was increasing, and with the rise in the survival of preterm babies and the number of babies who were therefore developing cerebral palsy. The programme started in October 2018 with funding from the LMS and was working in partnership with Health Innovation Network. A midwife was recruited from each South East London trust to formalise, educate and embed the use of magnesium sulfate for preterm mothers under 32 weeks gestation who are in labour, and also to ratify the in utero transfer guidelines. My trust was funded for me to work 7.5 hours a week for the year to deliver the programme. The other PRECEPT midwives and I underwent excellent training and preparation at the HIN head office. We were provided with an extensive toolkit to enable us to set out a simple and effective training session, which we then rolled out to all midwives, doctors and neonatologists. I won't forget my first day at the HIN when we were presented with the evidence in clear and simple terms. The benefits of magnesium sulfate and the potential reduction in cerebral palsy was real, and a huge difference could be made to the lives of babies and their families. It was like a light bulb moment for me, and I took my enthusiasm I felt from that first session with me whenever I was teaching and sharing the evidence at my trust. Our goal was to ensure that at least 85% of eligible mothers receive magnesium sulfate and 95% of them by 2020. My unit starting figure was 55%, so I had some work to do. I'd never undertaken a project before, so I was a bit apprehensive and I felt a great sense of responsibility as this programme was so important. I need not have worried. The team at Queen Elizabeth are a great bunch, and when I started to teach them about the benefits of magnesium sulfate and the practicalities of administering it, they were all on board. I recruited some other preterm champions and they advocated for the women when I wasn't there. My aim was to make all of us champions eventually, and a free pen and a badge went down a treat. Although I used the toolkit provided with great success, it was not restrictive. We were able to adapt and add things that worked for us, and we shared knowledge, tips and experiences with the other PRECEPT champions from the other hospital sites. I designed stickers for the neonatal notes so that the neonatal unit could easily identify which mothers had received magnesium sulfate in labour, and this improved reporting accuracy on Badgernet, which is our maternity computer system. I made a grab box so that if a mother came in pushing or needed a category 1 caesarean section, we could easily and swiftly administer magnesium sulfate. There was some apprehension surrounding magnesium sulfate as it is associated on labour ward with severe preeclampsia. But with the practical sessions on how to mix and administer it safely, confidence within the department grew. I added a prompt on our computer system so that when a preterm mother was admitted, a message appeared to any healthcare professional to consider magnesium sulfate and steroids. I also designed a small information card that had the administering regime with a pass card lanyard, so I knew who had received training and who hadn't. I undertook sessions with the newly qualified midwives, so before they hit the labour ward floor, they knew how to care for preterm mums and were aware of the preterm birth guidelines and how to administer magnesium sulfate. I was and I am tenacious. If an eligible mother didn't receive magnesium sulfate, we would investigate why and educate the doctors and midwives who were caring for her so that it didn't happen again, or we tried to remove the barriers that prevented the administration from happening. Our figures quickly improved across South East London. The preset midwives met once a month and used WhatsApp to share what was working well and what obstacles we were encountering. I had excellent support from my managers and my time was protected. I managed to train most members of staff within the first few months. The in utero transfer guideline, which my trust ratified early on, and the COP Finder app were also incorporated into the training to ensure that babies born under 28 weeks gestation were born at a tertiary unit. We had to keep COP Finder updated every day alongside the other trusts, and while sometimes this made things a bit simpler, it also made things sometimes a bit more difficult as it wasn't always clear who should be transferred out, and clinically things change rapidly, so we were not always successful at transferring out on time. The work on this area is ongoing, and with the participation of the emergency bed service and the knowledge that units are not permitted to refuse a transfer, this will hopefully improve in the future. In the last 2 years, I'm proud to say that our magnesium sulfate figures have remained high, and in many months we've achieved 100% of magnesium sulfate to all eligible mothers. It is truly embedded in our practice and is improving outcomes for these families. Having a dedicated preterm birth champion in each trust ensures that these vulnerable women and babies get individualised care. As a trust, we're working towards recognising the women who are at risk of preterm birth, and we're working towards a multidisciplinary continuity of care model. Looking forward, I intend to keep up the good work and possibly become involved in preterm birth clinics so that I can provide some continuity when these women come to labour ward in preterm labour. Thank you so much for your time.
What fabulous work on behalf of Sarah there, and really motivational, I think, for all of us, seeing what can be achieved. I'm going to move on now, and we're going to hear from Louise Butt, who is an advanced neonatal nurse practitioner in St Michael's, Bristol. She's going to give us the neonatal perspective. She has recently become the lead nurse for PERIPrem, which she's going to talk to you a little bit about, but is a quality improvement initiative around perinatal optimisation down in the southwest. Thank you, Louise.
Good afternoon. My name is Louise Butt, a nurse practitioner working on the regional neonatal unit at St Michael's Hospital in Bristol. I have many roles in this unit alongside my clinical role, but the one that is currently taking up the majority of my time is that of champion nurse for PERIPrem, a large project which is running throughout neonatal units in the southwest region. I've been asked today to talk to you about antenatal optimisation from my perspective as a neonatal nurse, with particular focus on my role as PERIPrem nurse champion. Perinatal excellence in reducing injury in premature birth, or PERIPrem, is the result of the collaboration between the West of England and South West academic health science networks to improve the outcomes of premature infants across the South West region, and which covers 12 acute trusts. This project builds on lessons learned from the design and delivery precept, which of course originated here at St Michael's, and is a bundle of 10 evidence-based interventions which aim to improve survival of preterm infants without brain injury. It is also in line with the NHS long-term plan to achieve 50% reduction in neonatal mortality and serious brain injury by 2025. The aim is for 85% compliance with the bundle throughout the duration of the project. PERIPrem aligns with the Antenatal Optimisation Tool with its inclusion of antenatal steroids, magnesium sulfate and birth in the right place. Following the work of Precept, we know that there is a long and successful history regarding the use of magnesium sulfate and antenatal steroids, which are now routine treatment in the antenatal period. What PERIPrem is focusing on is the mothers receiving both medications in a timely manner and within the optimum time. This should be achievable, assuming accurate prediction of preterm labour utilising a tool such as the QUIPP app. PERIPrem is also aiming for all mothers to give birth in a tertiary level unit if they are less than 27 weeks gestation or less than 28 weeks in a multiple birth and less than 1,500 grams birth weight. The local PERIPrem team at each hospital is made up of a neonatal consultant, neonatal nurse champion, obstetric consultant and midwife champion. Each member of the team are experienced in both their particular area of work and quality improvement, and each of them have skills and knowledge that will ensure the project is a success. The local perinatal team is supported by the team from both academic health science networks, who virtually provide a website of shared resources, collaboration and support to drive improvement. Quality improvement coaching has also helped to develop the confidence and skills of the team in applying QI techniques in order to embed PERIPrem into the units. Our PERIPrem team here at St Michael's have learnt from these resources and experience of other teams, ways in which to successfully implement the elements. As there are so many elements, we have realistically needed to prioritise how important each one is, especially since most of them are in regular use anyway. We have split the elements that are more difficult to achieve between us. This includes birth in the right place. We have also utilised the enthusiasm of staff working on the neonatal unit and CDS to help. Continued teamwork is important, utilising methods such as a hot debrief to bounce ideas off of each other, reflect on what is going well and look for ways to improve the process. Life QI is a platform of choice to support the design and implementation of PERIPrem, containing tools and documents designed to support the clinical team on our PERIPrem journey. A fundamental of quality improvement, and also one of my roles as neonatal nurse champion, is a collection of, reviewing and applying of data to help inform and direct change. The PERIPrem passport is a document used by every perinatal team for every preterm baby born, and is a checklist which includes all 10 elements of the bundle, including the antenatal optimisation elements. It is commenced when the mother presents in probable preterm labour and accompanies the baby on his or her transfer to NICU. Passport not only acts as a prompt, but as a data collection tool. An optimisation tool completed at the end of each month enables the collection and sharing of this data, generating a printable infographic that can be used to demonstrate the progress of each element. As with any change, there will always be barriers or challenges that occur, and this project is no different. St Michael's is very successful when it comes to antenatal optimisation. However, despite the success of the use of these medications, there are still mothers who do not receive them in the optimal time. Usually in our case, the result of those mothers who walk into their local hospital already in established labour. My joint experience working on NICU and CDS puts me in a good position to ensure this has been achieved. Results of national data show that place of birth is definitely a challenge in our region. This may of course vary across the country. My role as nurse champion involves helping to educate midwives as well as staff in the neonatal unit and neonatal transport team, advocating for the bundle and best practice whilst being sensitive to the challenges faced. This involves listening carefully to the challenges of all team members and jointly looking for a solution. Another challenge is ensuring accurate documentation. I work on a unit which is paper-free, which is a fantastic advantage for this kind of work. We have liaised with our data team to generate electronic forms giving the information required for each patient, which has been embedded into our admissions page. As a practicing nurse practitioner, I understand the challenges of working in a busy department and how much easier things are with technology to ease the burden. Another key person that was involved was our dietitian, who helped us to optimise antenatal and early expressing. Some education was needed here around which infants can have early breast milk, which is essentially everyone, even on a surgical and cardiac unit. We are therefore looking at education packages for the doctors, nurses, midwives and mothers so that everyone shares this vision of early breast milk for all babies. What works well? Well, essentially we have an excellent enthusiastic team who are successfully getting the message out in various ways. One example is via the PERIPrem information boards on both NICU and CDS. We have regular teaching sessions for the entire perinatal team provided by all members of the PERIPrem team. Utilising team away days and regular teaching opportunities has been a fantastic opportunity to provide this education. Simulation is also being used to define local challenges around clinical interventions. such as optimal core clamping and normothermia. By walking the process through, we can understand specific challenges in our unit, for example, the length of hoses for resuscitation gases. You will frequently see me getting excited at the prospect of a preterm baby being born, as this is a good opportunity to motivate the team and get paperwork in order for when the baby arrives. Essentially, PERIPrem is an absolutely amazing project and has been my opportunity as an AMP to be involved in improving the lives of our most vulnerable babies. We would like the bundle to become a normal part of a preterm infant's care from the mother's admission to CDS, even after project completion. During the period of 2019 to 2020, our PERIPrem baseline data shows that 92% of mothers at St Michael's received a full course of steroids and 82% received magnesium sulfate in the optimum time. 78% were in the right place at the time of birth. As you can see, the use of antenatal steroids and magnesium sulfate has improved, and in fact this is the case for the whole network. Birth in the right place is reported as a regional result and still continues to be a challenge. In summary, getting a great team together and joining together as a perinatal team is key. It's about keeping our eyes fixed on the main focus, which in this case are these tiny, vulnerable babies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. The PERIPrem initiative is amazing. It's got some fantastic resources, which we point to during the toolkit, but I think the organisation is extremely lucky to have someone with such enthusiasm like you on board to help. So very well done in those results. So we're going to finish now this session with an overview of how antenatal optimisation has become a focus for improvement across the UK. I'm going to hear from Tony Kelly, who's the National Clinical Advisor for MAT NeoSIP NHS England, who's now leading on the implementation of the BAPM toolkits. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you this afternoon about some of the work that we're doing within our national programme. My name's Tony Kelly. I'm the National Clinical Advisor for one of the National Patient Safety Improvement Programmes, and this one focuses on maternity and neonatal care. What I wanted to do is talk to you briefly about one of our key work streams, which is around the preterm perinatal optimisation care pathway. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my slides to go down. Right. So first slide I'm showing you here is giving you an idea about the width and breadth of the programme that I'm involved with. Along the top here, you can see the overarching aim that we have for our national programme, and along the right-hand side of this slide, you can see the 3 work streams that we're focusing on over the next few years. That includes some work on smoke-free pregnancy, some work specifically looking at the detection and management of deterioration in women and babies, and then the spread and adoption of this preterm perinatal optimisation care pathway. We're trying to look at this work in relation to the 3 components of the pregnancy journey, both the antenatal care, the peripartum, and then the postnatal and neonatal care components. The alternative way of looking at this work is by breaking it down into the components of each of the different work streams, and this slide looks slightly fussy and wordy when we look at it like this, but what I've done here is I've highlighted the individual elements of this work stream that focuses on the optimisation of the preterm infant. And as you can see, the 7 different elements that are highlighted there in the secondary driver boxes cover all parts of the journey of the mother and baby through from the point of review right through to the safe delivery of this baby into the neonatal unit. But one thing I did want to highlight is that the work that we're doing within this programme, it's not just about the technical aspects of the interventions, but also if I could draw your attention just briefly to the box that's titled Key Enablers at the bottom. And these 8 key enabling factors are things I will return to shortly later on in this presentation. But I just wanted you to be thinking about that as we move through, particularly in relation to safety culture, measurements, and the involvement of, as it's written here, patient and carer, but for us this would be the woman and her family in the co-design of any pathways that we're developing. Most of you will already know most of this background, which is around the idea that preterm birth is such a significant component in relation to the impact of babies when they're born on the basis of their survival and quality of life. It's a significant problem that affects us at national level, and at the moment we have a preterm birth rate of about 8% across England and Wales. What we're aiming to do is to reduce this preterm rate from 8 down to 6%, and that was very much part of the national ambition, which is encompassed within the work that we're doing and the wider maternity transformation programme. And this work that we're undertaking overlaps very much with recommendations that were made in the National Neonatal Critical Care Review last year, and also with element 5 of the Saving Babies Care Bundle, which was released in the early part of last year. And we shouldn't also forget the significant financial impact it has on the system for these babies when they are born early. There's good alignment with the work that we're planning with a number of documents and policies that are out there, and 2 of them I've already discussed. But equally, when we look at the findings from both the from HSID reports and from what's published from Embrace, we see that the impact that preterm delivery has on the morbidity and mortality for these babies is significant, and this is also echoed through reporting into NRLS, and equally some of the findings and recommendations that are made by BAPM at national level. We as a programme are operating within a wider system that we've developed, which works in partnership with other networks, including maternity clinical networks, the ODNs for neonatology, the relevant royal colleges, and then sitting within the larger bubble in the centre of this slide are the local maternity systems, the providers, the maternity voice partnerships, commissioning organisations and primary care. So we're trying to bring support to a much wider network process within a system across the whole of England. This is a visual that I'm sure has been shared in earlier presentations and sits within the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit that we're discussing today, and really reflects the wider journey of optimisation that we're focusing on across the whole of the care pathway that I'm going to talk about now, and really involves looking at the prediction of preterm birth, the diagnosis of preterm birth, and then the antenatal and peripartum optimisation, and then moving into the immediate postnatal period. But I just wanted to now just talk about where I think we're going to add value as a national programme over and above the work that's already been discussed. And I think it's really approaching the optimisation piece at macro, meso and at micro level. And the terminology is really there just for a sense of giving us a reference point. But when I'm thinking about micro, I'm talking about the way in which our processes work, function, or in many cases don't function, either within care settings, within departments and within individual organisations. We're also trying to add value to the way that we can improve the way that we work together across networks and within local maternity systems as a collection of providers. And then we're also trying to provide support at national and regional level so that we can try and share learning between these networks to regenerate the learning across the country and get adoption and spread at scale and pace. And I think one of the easiest ways to understand this more about the approach I'm suggesting is looking at 2 of the individual interventions that we're going to include within the bundle. We know antenatal corticosteroids are extremely beneficial for the care of the baby, and we often focus on the improvements that we get and the reduction in respiratory conditions, but equally there is a huge impact on survival as well as impact on the rates of intraventricular hemorrhage and necrotizing enterocolitis. They're very easy to administer, they have a low impact on the mother with regard to actually giving the medication, but we have a significant problem when we start thinking about issues of repeated doses. But the problem we have often with steroids is it's seen as very much an in-the-moment intervention. Somebody's on the labour ward in front of us as a labouring mother. We think there's a very low impact on giving the steroids. We know that they take time to work effectively, and so they're often given without thinking about the consequences of giving them, and more importantly, of not giving them. So part of what we're trying to do through this work is really change the narrative. We're trying to think about ways we can trust interventions that support care more, so to make the decision about not to give steroids in certain situations and avoid this just in case prescribing. And so providing support at local and network level about how we can orchestrate care better would be something that we want to focus on. And that would be very much looking at this micro level of understanding. When you move up to the meso level, then we're talking about system level improvement. And this really, the main focus here would be about optimizing place of birth. There's well understood benefits from these women delivering in the right place, but it requires a system level approach to make it work best. We've also got an opportunity to get upstream of these issues, so not just thinking about how we transfer women between organisations at the time that they actually come in potentially labouring, but understanding how we can get upstream of the issues, thinking about advising women who may be at risk of early delivery early in their pregnancies and to attend earlier, thinking about messaging we can put out within patient groups to reduce the risks of preterm labour, focusing on getting pregnancies to be more smoke-free. So this is the way that we can work at this meso or network level. And then when we can go up to national level and look at this macro level, what we're looking at doing is combining these 7 interventions, using and producing an interactive care pathway tool that would be both gestational and geographically sensitive, and will provide support to clinical teams and a balance between what they need to do and how they need to do it, and bridging the gap often between what we know is best practice at national level and wordy and in-depth guidelines that are often buried within our own intranet services and not easily accessible on day-to-day clinical practice. And then I think, just turning to some of these key enablers briefly before I finish, we also can provide quite significant support on national level through measurement. And we're doing this by building on some of the work that's been done in Scotland over the last few years and looking at trying to analyse the way we provide these 7 independent interventions as a care pathway and then measure them effectively as a care bundle. So what we would want to look at is the proportion of women and babies who receive all of the relevant interventions to their care and look at how that affects outcome for those groups of mothers and babies. And equally, we've developed quite a robust and detailed measurement strategy, both combining outcome measures, process measures, and then what are described as balancing measures with a quality improvement thinking hat on. And again, reflecting on the steroids conversation I was just having, it's all well and good looking at the number of women who are receiving antenatal corticosteroids in an appropriate time, but we also want to be thinking about the number of women who ended up receiving antenatal corticosteroids who deliver more than a week after they were given, because these are the types of interventions we want to discourage. I think it's really important we think about culture, and certainly one of the areas that we're very excited to be taking forward with BAPM again is trying to examine how we can develop a more robust safety culture across the entire perinatal team. And this is something that's going to be absolutely integral to ensuring that this work is delivered in the most effective way possible. But I think the most important and going to be one of the areas that we really need to give increased focus on is how we can design these pathways and the pathways of care and the environments of care for both mother and baby, that they actually provide the best experience of high quality safe care that they deserve. And certainly we're weaving this into all of the work we're doing as we go forward. So in summary, what we're aiming to do is to improve the quality and safety of care, reduce down unwanted clinical variation in care, and improve the experience of care for mothers and babies at a national level, a regional level, a system level, and an organisational level. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you too for highlighting the collaboration that is going on between organisations in sort of the perinatal sphere that I think is probably true to say it's a bit unprecedented. The effort to try and ensure that message is consistent and that we're not duplicating effort and that we're not asking clinicians to duplicate effort as well, I think is a really important part of all of this work going forward. So we've come to the end of the presentation section. And I'm sure you'll agree that the passion and drive that you've heard today has been really motivational. We've had lots of questions through in the chat, and we're going to move now. I'm going to introduce Cora Doherty, who is my co-chair for this, to moderate these questions and put them to our panel.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie Claire, and a fantastic session by all. And a major thanks to Jamie as well in the backstage, who's helped us all with any technical issues that we've had. Certainly for me, it's been a big issue. So a few questions, a number of them have already been answered, but I'll go through. And one for you, Manju, is really, and this is about will the QUIPP app be incorporated into NICE guidance as a prediction tool? Unmute. Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Perhaps a shared question for myself and Naomi, but we have been waiting for 2 publications to really go through into the literature before I think NICE will entertain changing their views on quantitative fibronectin first as a prediction tool, and then hopefully taking a view on the use of the QUIPP app. But I think that's where we need to get to. I know that the BMFMS has written quite strongly that NICE revisits their stance on the use of quantitative fibronectin, but thus far we haven't got any movement there, if I'm being absolutely honest. So it will be something we continue to fight on or to highlight. But with the endorsement of BAPM and the endorsement, I think nationally that this is going to be the way forward. Hopefully we will start getting there. But I think it still leaves some hospitals feeling that that they're not paying attention to NICE guidance if they use the QUIPP app or quantitative fibronectin. So I think that support needs to be there for people who are feeling more vulnerable. And I don't know if perhaps Tony can comment on that as well as a national driver, how we get around this issue if NICE won't change the guidelines based on the fact that there's not that published evidence out there in their minds as yet.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to add some comments to that. I mean, I would agree with what you've just said. I think the difficulty is, from my understanding, when the guideline was produced by NICE last time, was the remit of the guidance was quite tight. And I think Jane Norman, who was developing it, felt it quite difficult to actually incorporate a direct discussion about the use or non-use of QUIPP and indeed quantitative fibronectin. My sense is, on a national level, what we're doing is encouraging networks locally to look at how they are managing their in utero transfers effectively. And I think certainly the work that you've given a fantastic example of and sort of a presentation on today echoes work that I've seen across a number of networks around the country that shows that you can really drive up the proportion of babies that end up being born in the right centres. However, some areas of the country, Oxford particularly, have not had to use predictive tests and managed to achieve very high rates. But I think that's mainly because their geography is quite small. But equally, the culture across the network is very open. And I think a lot of this is about getting agreement between organisations on how things are managed when the requests go forward. So my understanding is that there is the John Radcliffe in Oxford don't ever refuse transfers when they are requested, but they regularly will review the quality of those transfers across the networks. So certainly from a national level, we don't plan to people the way in which they need to organise themselves, but we'd be very encouraging about how they look at, interpret and interrogate their in utero transfers. And certainly by using examples where QUIPP has been really successful, I think what we'll end up doing is tip the balance in the favour of using these tests.
Okay, well, thank you very much, both Tony and Manju. That's great for that, and raising the importance of team working across the board, both at trust and network level, which is really important. There have been a couple of questions around the related to transfers and the extreme preterm framework. So I'm going to come to Julie Clare about that, if I may. And so a couple of questions around how do we determine which babies get transferred if they fall under the extreme preterm framework?
So again, we would advise using the BAPM extreme preterm framework to make decisions alongside parents across the perinatal team about active resuscitation or not. And if that is decided upon as a pathway, that those babies should be afforded the same consideration as older babies as well. It came up during development of the toolkit about whether or not a 5% chance of preterm birth was sufficient in those extremely preterm infants, and whether or not there should be a more individualised approach for the really tiny babies who may benefit more from being born in a NICU setting. So we've incorporated that into some of the decision making that's in the toolkit.
Thank you very much. And before I move on to anybody else, just come back to Tony, as somebody has just come through, and to Tony saying, how can you or we encourage or incentivize LMSs to focus on preterm birth rather than, say, more traditional outcomes such as breastfeeding and smoking at term?
Crikey, okay, that's quite a wide question. Part of the work that we're doing as a national programme, as I outlined in the early part of my presentation, is there will be a focus on these 3 work streams. There is the relationship we have is primarily, as a national programme, is down to the individual 44 LMSs across the country, but we're doing that in partnership with the teams within the 15 patient safety collaboratives that operate across the geography of England. So what we're aiming to do is to wind together the LMSs, the patient safety collaboratives, and then the 2 sets of clinical networks, or clinical networks involving the maternity networks and the neonatal networks. That partnership process will focus on then each of the LMSs doing work in these 3 areas over the next 3 to 4 years. So everyone will be expected to do this work, and everyone will be expected to focus on this work at some stage over the next few years. The discussions that will happen over the coming months will work out which areas people want to start with as a priority. So if it's felt very much that preterm optimization is the area that they want to focus on, then those conversations will happen between the providers and their LMSs, and the LMSs and the patient safety collaboratives. And what we're aiming to do is to support people on the basis of where they feel the most need is. Within the work on optimization, when that starts, one of the key areas that we will all need to give particular focus to at the beginning is ensuring that we've got the right agreements between organisations across these networks about how these babies and mothers will move when they need to. Because although a lot of this work can be done at trust level, and the early parts of these pathways are the responsibility of everyone, no matter how big or small the unit may be, a lot of the onus is ensuring that these mothers move in a timely fashion to allow their babies to deliver, particularly with the extreme premature group of under 28 weeks, in the correct place for gestation. So I think the easy answer is it's about starting the conversations now. It's about understanding what the need and the ambition is of the local system, but eventually everyone will be needing to work in this area over the next few years.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. That's great, and actually raises the issue really, which we discussed when we were doing the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit, about the importance of exception reporting. And I think at the MCN network of doing exception reporting around when transfers haven't taken place. And I think Lawrence and his team at Oxford have done a really good job with that. So next question, and I'm mindful of the time, is probably really to Ellie and Naomi and Louise, and maybe a quick comment from the 3 of you on this, and really around the education of the preterm labour for mothers who are pregnant and not recognising contractions. And if you got any take-home messages about what to say to mothers, or what sort of education we could put in place so that mothers are aware if they're going into preterm labour.
Shall I don't know, shall I just I'll start. Yeah. Obviously I'm not medically trained, so I am just a mother who probably would have wanted to know just a little bit earlier on, just some honest communication and some facts. I think when you first go to your midwife, obviously it's you know that you're pregnant, you go, it's quite late on, isn't it, when you go, but I think just a chat really, and maybe some honest sort of speaking about what you would need to look for, because I think one of the other mothers commented on the Q&A that by the time you get to antenatal groups, it's too late then. Lots of us will have the really premature children would have been born already. So for first time mothers, you have absolutely no idea, and nobody talks about it. I mean, to not know what a premature rupture of membrane even meant, or what was that, and it just could be chatted about a lot earlier on. So it's just communication. And I know scaring mothers is not what you want to do, but it's a bit like if you buy a car, and you learn to drive. Of course, you still need to know what's going to happen if you crash that car. You can't just ignore it, but most people won't crash that car and it will all be fine. But it's just having some honest but reassuring, some reassuring chats by your midwife, but some honest conversations about what to look for, and so that earlier on what you should be looking out for, I think.
Okay, great. Naomi, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just say, Ellie, I really agree with everything you're saying about communication. I think also we've also done some work, which I've just had a notification the paper's been accepted, so hopefully it should be published in the next few weeks, interviewing mothers who have preterm babies, and a lot of the language we found they used was they described their the first signs and symptoms they had as things like period pain. When we look through the medical literature, that we've never described it as period pain, we've always described it as abdominal pain. So I think just using that same language which mothers use, and trying to give them reference points so that when we're talking to these women, we can make sure that we're giving them the right message and know what sort of things to look out for. I know you mentioned before about your water's going and not really knowing if they're gone or not. So I think just trying to find those reference points which women can relate to rather than trying to use this medical terminology, I think would be really helpful as well.
Great. And then Louise, if we could have a brief word from you, have you any comment on that?
Yeah, I agree with both of them. Just a little bit of antenatal information. I had a premature baby myself and didn't have a clue when I went into labour at all. So I know we don't want to scare them, but I do think that a tiny bit of information, just very simple sort of indications that you might be in preterm labour, just so that they can get themselves checked out early, and we don't get these ladies coming in that are already in established labour by the time they get there, and we can sort of give them the magnesium sulfate and the steroids in the optimal time. So yeah, just information.
Great, thank you very much. And now really last two questions kind of to Julie Claire, and then I think I'll leave Julie Claire to close the session. Really good question about are we able to, if we cannot undertake a preterm in utero transfer, is it possible for transport teams to go and actually provide the resuscitation on site? And we see this in other adult teams where they go out, the trauma teams where we're going out. So maybe that's something that is a big question and we can't necessarily answer today. You might have a comment on that. And then the other thing is, how do we really get this antenatal toolkit? If an organisation wants to, a trust wants to get this going, or a network, what are the first steps they take? And then I'll leave you to finish to close the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cora. I mean, I think in regards to the first question, you really want to have the right people there to resuscitate and stabilise babies, that's for sure. And we know that many of our transport teams are really struggling with capacity and availability, and I don't think we'll probably ever have a model where that will be either routine or universal. So I think the emphasis should be really on trying to support local hospitals with the tools and the skills and the communication that they might need to manage these cases as best as possible. And I think sometimes we also, as clinicians, say, oh, well, we couldn't have given steroids, or we couldn't have transferred that woman because she presented too late. And it goes back again to what Ellie was saying. If women know early enough about if they know about the signs and symptoms of preterm labour, they can present early enough. And I think we sometimes just act as if those deliveries where babies just tumble out are unavoidable, and we need to stop thinking like that. In terms of where do you start? Well, download the Antenatal Optimisation Toolkit, and it takes you from the very beginning of your journey right through. It provides you with tools to lobby management and to get resources that you need, and helps you really understand your process and your data, and takes you through that journey. So I guess that's probably a good place to start, as well as a good place to end the session today. So the other thing is, I think, is that talking to other units who have done it really well, we partnered on this toolkit with the NNAP, and the NNAP online tool is a great place to look up and find other units who are doing this really well. And you can search for units that are the same size as yours in your own locality, the same kind of acuity, and start up conversations with them, so that we've got peer support across the country, which is great. So thank you very much. We're going to wrap up now, and I'd like to thank all of our fantastic speakers today who've given us much food for thought, and hopefully we'll send you back to your own units to help you to, and we'll encourage you to start looking at your own processes and your own data. Can I thank all of you as the audience for joining and for showing such strong participation. It's been fantastic to interact so well with you. And I just want to give you a heads up about the early breast milk toolkit webinar, which is happening on the 7th of December. And there will be more details to follow on the BAPM website and through Twitter and so on. But that's the toolkit itself will be launched in the next couple of weeks. And there will be the final toolkit is optimal cord management. And we're very much hoping that that will be launched before the end of the year with a webinar to follow too. So thank you very much again, and on behalf of BAPM, wishing you all well in the coming weeks. Thank you.